Welcome to the Business and Brews podcast, where our mission is to highlight local businesses in the Triangle area and shed light on different industries.
So welcome back, everyone, to the Business and Brews show. This is our first recorded version of the show, and I'm super excited. I have my friend Dan here, who I met through a network. Dan is also a veteran. So Dan, really quick, just tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, man. First of all, thanks so much for inviting me to join you. As we sit here, it's St. Paddy's Day recording this, and I'm celebrating properly business and brews with one of my favorite beverages, Guinness.
Nice.
At one of my favorite places, I got to give a shout out to them if that's okay. It's Keagan's of Virginia Beach, wonderful Irish pub. So they're celebrating the right way as well. Anyway, so Dan Woerheide, and I am a Army veteran, father of girls, raised by a single mom. There's a lot of history. I've done a lot of things. But what am I working on now is probably more important. And I'll tell you, my primary income at the moment comes from supporting a very select group of marketing agencies with project management and technical implementation type services. So, everything from putting together websites, hosting, et cetera, to executing those marketing campaigns effectively using, CRM management, email software management, those types of activities. But what I really love doing is having conversations with people and helping them get out of their own way, remove barriers, and move into either finding or creating work that they truly love. Most people get stuck in someone else's life, is what I like to say, right? We have these things that we're told that are how we become responsible, contributing members of society. And it's things like going to school or going into the military and, pursuing a life that is going to provide an income, that's going to allow us to have some things, that's going to allow us to support our families well. And we find out at some point that it's not necessarily our calling isn't there, but we're not completely fulfilled in those things that we've landed on. And so I help them find that work that's going to be meaningful, purposeful, and ideally profitable. And that's the piece of my business that's starting to take off and grow well. It's coaching is what it is, but it's coaching because I have a passion for helping people find that direction. That's the work I'm doing now and the future of where I'm going.
That's awesome, man. So Dan, I know I've followed you for a little while now, but I remember seeing about your podcast come up. And tell me a little bit about that, how that came about and how it's been going.
That's a good question. And I think there's a couple pieces to unpack there. So I started the podcast initially because, well, let me back up and say that many people consume content in different ways. We either consume podcasts and enjoy doing that. We enjoy reading blogs. Maybe it's books, whatever it is, we like to consume information. And I started to explore what would work best for me. And I figured out really quickly, I just don't like the writing pieces of blogging. So the blogging thing was not for me. And I was like, well, what else can I do? I want to be able to connect with people. I want to be able to share at least some of the messages that I have or I come across and people I think need or maybe even want to hear. And podcasting was one piece I explored. And so I started the podcast earlier last year, 2020, as just a fun exploration. And I started it from a marketing focus. So if you go back right now and listen to a few of my first episodes, I was really struggling, honestly, to provide valuable content because it wasn't, at the end of the day, it wasn't really what I was passionate about sharing. And so in November, I made a switch and started producing content that's more focused on what we just talked about, that aligns with the coaching work and the conversations that I'm having with people. And that's kind of been the journey for the podcast. It's It's an avenue to a friend of mine named Dr. Fred Jones. I had him on early on as well. And one of the things we talked about, he shared that, each of us has unique experiences, unique education, all of the things that lead us to being unique people. And when we don't share our own experiences with others, there's someone right now who's looking for someone who's done something that you've already done. And those messages are valuable to them. If we don't do the work that we're supposed to do to share those messages through whatever medium, then we might be depriving someone of something they desperately need today. And so that's kind of the piece that ties in for me in continuing that journey with the podcast. And one of the big pieces is just doing it imperfectly. I've recorded podcasts on my iPhone. Like I said, today I'm sitting here at a pub with music in the background and just enjoying the process instead of focusing on how do I make this perfect. I don't care if I get 10,000 downloads. I care about helping that one person today.
That's awesome. I don't think you mentioned it. What's the name of your podcast?
Yeah, I failed to mention that. Thank you. It's called the Prow Growth Podcast. Prow Growth VA is the name of my business. And the Prow Growth Podcast is the extension of that in those conversations.
That's awesome. And I have listened to it. I loved it when I stumbled across it and listened to as many episodes as possible. I completely agree with you when basically talking about how each person is unique and, whatever it is you want to do, someone else has already done. Somebody recently said to me something about when someone, every time an older person dies, an entire library of books dies with them. And that's just because there's so much experience, there's so much education that goes into each individual. And so I'm going to bring this up because I want everyone to know about it. I want it to be a birthday present, but I'm working on a book that I'm going to dedicate to my brother because he doesn't read hard copy books. I think he does a little Audible, very little podcast, but he's not he's a hands-on kind of guy. Yeah. And I think he's got a lot of experience to share. And so I want to see if I can capitalize on that and dedicate it to him because he's one that, whenever it is his time, there's an entire library that's going to go with him. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah. I've come across a few people that are doing work like that in the veteran community and I really admire people who are taking that initiative to capture some of those lessons, some of those stories. I told my daughter recently, we were visiting my grandfather in Florida, and he's turns 93 this week. He's a World War II veteran, a Korean War veteran.
Oh, wow.
And ran a successful business for a long time. He is a prime example, but I told her to listen intently to the stories that he shares, because what he's seen and what he's done in his lifetime through those eras, she and I combined will never be able to experience that level of lessons.
That's awesome.
So valuable. Yeah, I think that's a great plan. So when are we expecting this book?
It has to be done by January 27th of next year.
Love it.
So I got to be honest, even if I just have like a copy for proofreading at that point, just something I can hand to him as a birthday present. But so tell me, Dan, I know this whole pandemic thing seems to maybe be sizzling a little bit, but it's affected everyone differently. So some people see an increase in business, some people see challenges. How did it affect you in your business, and what did you do?
Well, that's a good question. First, I have to say that there are lots of people who are suffering. suffering as a result of the requirements, the restrictions, the mandates, all of the things that came with this pandemic. And even beyond that, there are plenty of people who are suffering because of loss in their families or, friends. And my heart definitely goes out to those people. So I'll say that first, because what I'm going to say next wouldn't sound right without it. My business, last year, starting in March, actually, when everything in the United States went to crap, my business started to experience the most growth that I'd ever seen. And that's in part due to some shifts on me, my mindset, my approach to things, and the way I was viewing things. And I don't know if there's a direct correlation to when those things occurred, because I had a little extra time to do some introspective work, or if I was just in that phase of my journey. It could be a combination of both. But so last year I experienced tremendous growth in multiple facets. My business, personally, and just the focus and future of my business has seen a lot of change over the past year as a result. And what I would say is, in my conversations with other people who experienced similar results in their business, growth and changes in trajectory, all approached the pandemic from a perspective of growth versus, I don't even know the word, but they all had this growth mindset about them and embraced the challenges that we were facing. Restaurant owners, many of them have shut down or had to close their doors, and they're all talking about how terrible this has been. But there have been successful restaurant owners right here in the same area. I'm sitting in Virginia Beach. So there have been successful restaurants here only because of the way they approached it. And they said, okay, I get it. We've got to be safe. We've got to do the things. We've got to listen to what our government's telling us, and or risk, whatever penalties, fines, etc. And there was a short period of time where they weren't allowed to do anything. And there's some states that I'm sure have experienced more, but they stood out because they started looking at how can we continue to do things that are not, for lack of better words, selfish. Not necessarily from a profitability perspective, but how can we support our community and show them that we are a part of this community together, not separately, not for the purpose of making your money ours, all of the things. And that is probably the most significant thing that stood out to me as my business started to grow, was a mindset shift from how do I figure out how to make more money to how do I help people and serve them better. And when I made that mindset, internal, external shift, everything changed. So the common theme is the way we approach life and business to me. And it's intriguing because I have had conversations with successful people who experienced tremendous growth through the pandemic. And that's the one thing I see in common.
Yeah, that's awesome. I see where you're coming from there, and I like it. I had some thoughts early on when I saw, some businesses in the same industry, some see a decrease, some see an increase. And I completely agree with your idea of how do we give back? How do we contribute and being a part of that community? So I guess my next question, Dan, kind of deals hand in hand with that. If it's okay, I'd like to get specific because I'm curious. Listening to your episodes, I've heard a lot of good ones, and I've heard a lot of awesome people on there.
Thank you.
So I'm curious if there's a specific person who either you were able to help or someone who was able to help you that you'd like to highlight.
Man, so there's a couple things that stand out, and I might get a little personal and might go into some territory where people are not in agreement, but that's okay. I've observed a couple things recently that have made some connections for me, but I told you there was a lot of introspective work that went into the shifts in my business, and it started with Dan Miller, and not necessarily conversations with him personally, although I've had the opportunity to have a few of those as well. But Dan Miller is the author of 48 Days to the Work and Life You Love. It used to be To the Work You Love, but the 20th anniversary edition came out last year, end of last year or early this year, and it's now To the Work and Life You Love, because they're definitely tied together. When you find work or create work that you're passionate about and it aligns with the things that you feel good doing, it changes the way you respond to the other things in your life. So I became a seminar facilitator for that program, the 48 Days to the Work and Life You Love. And as a seminar facilitator, and I think there's only about 20 of us in the world at the moment, going through those materials on my own to pursue that certification and be able to deliver that material well to other people as those opportunities arise, I was doing the work. And that was a huge contributor to some of my shifts and realizations that I was not doing all of. I love problem solving, and I love the technical things that I'm able to do for the marketing agencies I support. I love that work. But what I found through this process was that I was doing this work to build a business based off of the premise that would enable me to have more conversations with people and help them get out of their own way. And I was doing that work for free. And then along came Ray Edwards. Ray Edwards is well known, at least in my communities and my circles. And I'll get to that piece in a minute because it's also important. But he's well known in that space as a copywriter. Very successful copywriting business. He teaches other people and certifies them in copywriting using his formulas, the pastor formula, which is, it's amazing. And he's really good at what he does, but he also does business leadership development and coaching. And in that perspective, I had the opportunity to sit in on an event that he held. It was the 6-figure intensive. It was basically about scaling your business to 6 figures and beyond. And what I didn't know at the time was that I was going to be in the middle of a coaching session in this process. I brought up a sticking point for me, and I said, all right, I just have to be real. And in that process, they said they just started coaching me and helped me realize that if I'm able to make an impact in someone's life through a 1-hour phone call, shouldn't I then be able to charge a reasonable rate for that in order to give me the space and mind space and all of the things to help more people? Because at the end of the day, my goal was to help people. So I was building a business over here in the marketing side in order to have conversations with people that needed help getting out of their own way and wasn't charging for it. And at the end of the day, that is coaching in its essence. And we, through those conversations, people have clearly told me that I bring value to them, and I help them, take the next steps and bring clarity to their situations. And I loved doing that. And yes, at the end of the day, if I can charge for that, then it actually enables me to create more space to do more of that. So I had a mindset approach to that. That was a challenge. So Ray Edwards was a huge contributor. And I mentioned the circles piece, and it's important because of the next thing I'm going to say, which is I looked at all of the things I've done in the recent years. So I was a Story Brand certified guide, Donald Miller. I was a financial coach, a master financial coach, Dave Ramsey. Dan Miller, author of 48 Days to the Work and Life You Love. Ray Edwards. David Hancock, who's the CEO and founder of Morgan James Publishing, is a huge contributor to mentoring me. And he's a personal friend that he actually lives about 35 minutes from me. And we sit down every other month or so for lunch, and we have some wonderful conversations. But a realization I just had the other day, they all have a Christian connection. And I'm not traditionally been connected with faith as part of the things that I'm doing, although I've always had this eagerness and this desire, drive to learn. And learning about faith was something I was driven to learn more about. I attended Liberty University and actually loved one aspect of going to formal education. I hate formal education, but I enjoyed learning what they were teaching from a faith perspective and how to study the Bible, for instance, because I think one of the reasons people don't explore learning more about faith is that they just didn't have a mentor. They didn't have a good connection with Sunday school. Like I didn't have a good connection with Sunday school. So when I have conversations about Christian faith and leadership, I feel lost. I feel like people are much smarter than me. And it's those ways I was brought up is the reason I feel that way. It's not anybody's fault. So I started realizing that I wanted to explore more of that. And the one connection that has significantly impacted my life, my business, my growth, self-development, professional development has been a commonality of faith-based leaders sharing their messages, whether it's hope, whether it's finances, it doesn't matter. I've just realized that connection recently and was inspired by that. I hope that's not too much.
No, that's perfect. I like it. So you kind of made me think of something because when you mentioned that that's not necessarily how you came up and what you're used to, and you started to not only find an interest in it, but also see a correlation in the people that you surround yourself with. That's how I was brought up. But earlier, I think you mentioned that you're a product of a single parent household.
I am. My mother raised 3 boys. I'm the oldest. I have 2 younger brothers, and I have to say that's a huge contributor. By the way, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's also a huge contributor because I watched my mother struggle to raise 3 boys and provide for them and to do all of the things. And the honest truth at the end of the day is why I'm in coaching comes down to that one big factor of I wish someone had been there to help mentor her and show her that she can do whatever it is she wants to do. And if there's barriers, helping her figure out what that looked like and removing them or navigating through them. And so that sticks out to me as well.
That's awesome. That's why I brought it up, because I feel like sometimes people who see struggles, and those can be differently defined in childhood or early on, are the ones who see a lot of success in the long term. So that's why I was curious, because from where I'm sitting, you're a fairly successful person and you're helping other people succeed as well. So it speaks volumes just to your life experiences and how you're putting them to work instead of using them as excuses.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the perspective, and I'm humbled. There's a long way to go and plenty more people to help, and I'm just doing my best every day to help more people better. That's my new mantra. So
I like it.
Let me say by more, I want to clarify that I don't mean numbers. I just mean if I can impact that one person's life today and change their experience, their approach, their viewpoints, or help them see that there are better things and how they can achieve those things, it impacts the other people around them. And so from that perspective, it is numerical, but for me, it's about one person at a time.
That's awesome. It's awesome. I appreciate that. So now I want to shift into a segment, Dan, we call the 4 questions we have brewing. These are some fun ones.
Let's do it.
The first one I like to ask is, when you're not helping change the world, what do you like to do for fun?
Oh man, that's a really good question. And I'm going to be honest again and say that's a challenge for me. For so many years, having been a career in the military, my purpose was issued to me on a day-to-day basis. And I lost touch at some point. This was a huge realization, by the way, but I lost touch at some point with what things interest Dan the most and what do I really enjoy doing for me. I like fishing. I like hunting. I enjoy hiking. I don't know if it's age or not, but the older I get, the realization that I really enjoy being in nature has been a huge thing. And so like I was in Florida recently and enjoyed just driving through a couple of the nature drives that they have in the Cape Canaveral National Seashores. Amazing stuff. Excuse me. Alligators are cool. Birds are neat. You know, it's just when you take time to enjoy it, it's really fun. Surfing is something I'm trying to tackle. I haven't quite achieved a level of success that I want there yet, but I'm continuing to pursue that. Beach, the ocean, water, outdoors. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely. That's awesome. I guess I never really thought about the military contributing to that, but I definitely have a work 24/7 mindset. And I do try to navigate around that, but it is a challenge. I've never thought about that though. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, they create some different dynamics, and I know you got 3 more questions, and I honestly didn't ask you beforehand how long we're going to go, but one of the dynamics that was important to me because I'm divorced. I maintained a great relationship with my youngest daughter, and my oldest daughter has kind of kept me at a distance. The biggest contributing factor to that, and I take all blame for, well, not all the blame, of course, in the relationship dynamics, but there are some things that impacted me. The military teaches family first out of context, and I think it's important to bring that up for especially people who are still active duty, might be listening to this. They mean mission and military family first, and they don't really help you navigate the personal side of family. And that realization came a lot late for me and resulted in some impacts to my relationships where it was too late, at least in other people's perspectives, to navigate potential for building that back up. And I saved, fortunately, again, the relationship with my youngest daughter, but that's been an important understanding as well.
That's good. Before we move on, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay, my headset died, so
don't worry.
So Dan, the second question I like to ask is, and this applies in many different fashions, books, audiobooks, podcasts, whatever. What content are you consuming right now?
Right now, I'm in a mastermind with Ray Edwards, and the book we're reading is, I think it's How to Never Lose a Customer Again. Forgive me if the title's slightly incorrect. I'll be sure to send you a link to it after this so you can make any adjustments we need to. But and before that, it was Hook Point. It was all about creating that initial hook point from a content perspective. There's so much good out there, and it doesn't matter what you're reading. Thank you for asking me that. Books, that's what I'm reading. Podcasts, it changes all the time, but I love the 48 Days podcast with Dan Miller. I listen to the Story Brand podcast fairly regularly. Ray Edwards, and then of course I work on producing mine. Yeah. So right now that's it. I'm trying to create more space to consume some more, but those are the big ones that stand out.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And I was going, yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to say, 15 minutes a day, you can read an average of 1 book a month. So it really doesn't matter what you're reading. Just pick up a book and start, or listen to a book and start. Right? A lot of people have drive times to and from work, and that's a great time to just consume something that's going to help you learn, help you grow.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I, of course, have been listening to your podcast, Prow Growth, and then One of my favorites is Business Wars by Wondery. Slightly more entertaining, but also business and history. It is very well produced, so it's fun to listen to. And then
I'll check it out.
Yeah, and then my one of my favorite books is The Marshmallow Test, which, if you know anything about delayed gratification, the history of it, and all that, that's kind of the premise of the entire book. But
that sounds great. I do know a little bit about delayed gratification as it pertains to our conversation. I would just say that we often spend time looking at what others have done, what others are doing, and we fail to see what they did to get there. Everybody has to start somewhere. And so if I was going to share one thing with somebody today, it would be just start. If you've listened to my episodes, you might have heard the story from Dan Miller, and I don't know where it originated, but it's 5 frogs were sitting on a log. 3 of them decided to jump off. How many are left on the log? Most people would probably answer 2 because 3 decided to jump off. The answer is 5 because they've only decided. They haven't taken any action. Everything you could ever want is on the other side of action.
I like it. When you said just a second ago to start, John Acuff actually wrote 2 books, Start and Finish.
Yes,
and
yes.
I didn't know about Start before I read Finish, and he references it, and I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, both great books. And I love John Acuff's work too. Again, he's also tied into that same community of people I talked about earlier.
Okay.
I was introduced to John Acuff through the Ramsey Solutions organization. So Dave Ramsey, interesting connections.
Yeah, I got a buddy that would like to talk to you. John Acuff is his favorite author. So the third question, a little bit more challenging, but I believe in you, is if you could have a beer with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
So this might have been challenging for me years ago, but one of the people I would love to sit down and have a beer with is my father. He passed away when I was 3.
That'd be a good conversation.
Yeah. And I think the why is probably self-explanatory.
Yeah. No hesitation.
That would be my pick. And sorry, I got a little emotional on that one, but yeah, not hard.
No, you're good, man. That's awesome. I've answered this in many previous episodes, but I think I'm going to stick to the same answer, Gary Vaynerchuk, and it would probably be wine.
Yeah, probably so. He does know a bit about wine, doesn't he?
Yeah. I have reached out to him to come on this show with no expectation.
Yeah.
Just not sure how the channels work, whether or not he even got the message. But
let me just highlight the importance of what you just said.
Okay.
I talk to people all the time who think they're not good enough to reach out to somebody or, invite somebody to their show or ask somebody a question because they're so much more experienced or so much more so-and-so or whatever it is. But what you just said to me is amazing and says a lot about who you are and where you're trying to go, because the worst they can tell you is no.
Yeah.
The fact that you even just tried to reach out says you're starting. And that's the premise of what that's everything we talked about. Everything I do. If you can just get out of your own way and forget about who they are, what they're doing, or where they've been, and just get the courage to ask them. The worst they're going to tell you is no. Maybe they say it nastily, and then you know who they are as a person. And is that really someone you want to be on your show anyway?
Yeah.
Great. If they're nasty about it, you learn a lot about people as you start to explore doing new things. But I'm proud of you, man. That's huge just to reach out and ask, because I don't know how many people wouldn't have attempted because of who Gary Vaynerchuk is.
It's more of a waiting game, because I feel like you'll rarely get a no. You'll just not get anything. I also wrote several other larger people, bigger names. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to name drop because I'm not trying to say like, look at me, but I fill out the contact form and it's for this show or my other show or whatever. And then you won't know until they say yes, because that's probably when they'll write you back, or their secretary. But it's fun. It takes about 5 minutes. So if somebody out there has a podcast, a show, a business, wants a consult, whatever, and you have a hero, send them an email like Dan said. Worst case scenario, you never hear back.
That's right, man. And I so I know that my she's much more than my assistant, but Elizabeth Fisher will be listening to this when you publish it. And that's a conversation we had this morning, actually. As we're recording this, it was a conversation we had this morning. And you've just unpacked so much, because it's not like you're inviting them to your house, or, you're walking into them on the street to say, hey, can you do this thing with me? I know that I'm not at your level, but there's no but there, right? You're sending an email, you're sending a LinkedIn note. And what's the worst that can happen? I did another, and I have to give them a shout out too, because what a great organization. But Startup Grind is a community of startups and people supporting startups, essentially. And I was a director for a local chapter for Startup Grind for a couple of years. And when I was looking for who could I bring in that's going to, help engage and inspire a community of entrepreneurs and startups to continue moving forward and get the education, resources, and knowledge that they needed, I was amazed at who said yes. I never would have been friends with Pete Evick is a friend of mine. And he owns, they just opened their third candle store in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. So that's their third location, but they just opened that on Friday as we're recording this. And what a great person to know. He's a successful professional musician who's also an entrepreneur and has done the things that we're talking about. And I never would have met him and never would have built that relationship with him and learned about who he was as a person if I just didn't ask him to come let me interview him.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Candle stores, huh?
And there's lots of other people too that, I can't sit, I'm not going to sit here and share names all day either, but they just ask, right? You never know who you're going to meet and what you're going to find out.
Definitely. So last and probably the most important question, Dan, because I know you've got the podcast, the business. If you're anything like me, you have 67 different email addresses and phone numbers and all this, but what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Uh-oh, our connection just dropped a little bit. Hold on. Okay. Are we back together? Okay. What's the best way to people get in contact with me?
Yes.
Support at ProwGrowthVA.com. Send an email. Or, if you sign up on my website for anything, you'll get my email there, and you can always reply to that as well. But support at ProwGrowthVA.com is the best way.
And that's your website too, ProwGrowthVA.com?
Correct.
Perfect. And I believe your podcast is just /podcast?
To get to the podcast page on my website, it is.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Everybody should listen to that. I think it contains a lot of value, especially for some.
I'm losing connectivity here.
Oh, you're fine.
You think everybody should?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah. It says my internet connection's a little unstable. It's probably because I'm sitting at a pub.
Try holding it steady.
But no, the internet connection. Smart ass. Okay. What were you think everybody what?
Everybody should listen to your podcast, because for someone who is just getting started with podcasting, it has a lot of value.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I won't hold you up too much longer, Dan, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences with us. I think I don't think we've had a coach on before per se, especially not in that space. So if anyone has questions about coaching, wants to start a coaching business, or maybe you need coaching, I highly recommend you reach out to Dan. I'll put all of his contact information, website, and that email address in the description of this video and the podcast. So be sure, if you haven't already, to like and subscribe so that other people find this episode and then learn about his podcast so they can gain the same amount of value that you have. Dan, thanks so much for joining in. And thanks so much for being here.
Ryan, it's been a pleasure. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to have these conversations. And if I may ask, if anyone's either in Virginia Beach, I'm moving to Cocoa Beach in April, at the end of April. So either of those locations, always feel free to ask me out for a beer. Even if you think I've done something that put you in that space where you're like, he'll just say no. Reach out to me, because we're going to have a great conversation. We're going to enjoy a good beer. And Ryan, do me one more favor. Tag, when you publish this, if you'll tag Keagan's Virginia Beach, the Irish pub, I'd greatly appreciate it. And I'm sure they would.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Thanks, Dan.
Absolutely, brother. I hope you have a great one.
All right. You too.
All right.
When the night gets lonely